Great to see you all. If you've been here for any length of time, you'll know that each time we gather, we look at a bit of the Bible. It's a big book. If you're not a Christian yet, you'll think that's a heck of a book to get through. Well, we try each time we gather to study a part of it, to understand a bit more of who God is, who he's made us to be. Today, we're going to look at a part of the Bible called Matthew chapter 8. Matthew's the first of the accounts of Jesus in the New Testament. If you've got a Bible, maybe you'd like to get it out and be ready to read it soon. If we played a game of word association and started with Christmas, I wonder where the trail would take us. Probably words like these: presents, family, tree, nativity, Jesus, holiday, mince pies, carols, Joseph, Mary, angels, shepherds, joy, turkey, excitement, family, perhaps loneliness, and so on and so on and so on. The trail could keep going. And perhaps after a while, the trail of words would lead us to Immanuel. Immanuel, which means God with us, we find in the Gospel of Matthew, Chapter 1, verse 23, the virgin will conceive, the angel is saying to Joseph, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Immanuel, which means God with us. The title of our Christmas series starting today. Now, many of us are familiar with Immanuel, the concept of God with us in Jesus. But I want to put to you that it is perhaps the most remarkable thing. The most remarkable thing that God should be with us. John in his gospel writes this: the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. God takes on human flesh and is with us. I think it is the most remarkable thing. One ancient poet, some of you will like this, wrote this: "'Twas much that man was made like God before in creation, but that God should be like man much more." And of course, Jesus still with us. God still with us, and God with us forevermore. And this truth that he is Immanuel, God with us, changes so very much. It's the way of our salvation, without which it would have been impossible. This truth that God is with us brings comfort. It empowers us. I don't know about the last time you're having a slightly tricky day, and the thought came to you, this is really tricky, but God is with me. Do you not think that would change a few things? It's an absolutely transforming truth. And there's another time when knowing God with us, Immanuel, is a very great thing to know. And it's this time. It's the time when storms hit. It doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian. It doesn't matter whether you're young or whether you're old. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or whether you're poor. It doesn't matter whether you're massively highly educated or not. Storms come our way. When I was thinking about this, I was just thinking across the family that is Citygate, both here in Bournemouth and at Southbourne, how many people that I've spoken to this year going through a serious storm in their lives. Since 2015-16, storms, you will have noticed now, have been given names. Names suggested by the public, who clearly have no better thing to do than to write in suggested names of storms. And they're done in alphabetical order, missing out the difficult letters like Q and Z and X and so on. The chief meteorologist, because I've wondered, why do they give storms names? Have you wondered that? Come on, you have, haven't you? You wonder, what's the point of giving storm? Apparently, the chief meteorologist at the Met Office says when a storm has a name, it becomes easier for the media and public to talk about it, share information, and prepare. Apparently. So there you go, that's why they've got names. There's only been one storm so far in 2025-26, because it goes from August to July. Do you know what that storm was called? Amy. The next four are going to be this, so get ready. Bram, Chandra, Dave, and Eddie. They're the next four storms coming your way at a town near you. The stormiest year since storm naming in the UK began was 2023-24, with 12 named storms. How stormy has 2025 been for you? For some of you, you can't really remember the last storm. For some of you, you wonder if you've ever been out of a serious storm. And the storms in your life and my life have names too. Physical illness, divorce, bereavement, unemployment, a performance review at work, doubts about your faith, financial crises, relationship upset with a parent, with a child, with a partner, a mental health crisis, an identity crisis. And if you would say, well, this year's not been very stormy at all, actually. Well, let me just tell you this because it's a fact. There is a storm probably coming. I'm not trying to be a prophet of doom. I'm simply being real. That storms are part of the everyday reality of life. And these storms come very suddenly often, but for a whole variety of reasons. You'll have noticed that sometimes a storm comes into your life because of someone else's sin. Sometimes a storm will come into your life because of your own sin. Sometimes it's trauma. Sometimes it's, perhaps you might say, the natural order of things, perhaps with an elderly death. Sometimes they seem to be absolutely random events out of nowhere. But storms come for sure. And storms, like the one we'll read about in a moment, also actually come as the result sometimes of following Jesus. Matthew chapter 8, go down to verse 23. It should be on the screen as well if you don't have a Bible with you. We read this. Then he, Jesus, got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Now, before we apply this story to the storms of our lives, I should make it clear that Matthew's primary point in giving this story about Jesus is to show that Jesus is Lord. Matthew has not included it in his narrative as here are some tips for how to deal with storms in your life. That's not why it's there. Absolutely not. It's not firstly a lesson on how to deal with storms in your life. Matthew 8, the whole chapter, shows Jesus as Lord. Matthew is presenting Jesus and saying, listen to him, he's the Lord. So Matthew chapter 8, he's the Lord over sickness. He's the Lord of all peoples. He's the Lord over evil powers. And here, in this story, Matthew's point is Jesus is Lord over all creation. Even the winds and the waves obey him. It's a miracle that reveals more of who Jesus truly is. And because of that and the story, it has application to our storms too. So note how the story starts. The story starts like this, verse 23. Jesus got into the boat and his disciples followed him. It's maybe a nice evening or a nice afternoon. They're getting away from the crowds, going across to the other side of this lake called Galilee. And it's probably quite nice and simple and calm. And following Jesus is just a breeze. He gets them away from the crowds. It's lovely to be with Jesus, and maybe the weather is absolutely fine. If you're a Christian, I wonder if you've ever thought this. When storms come, when troubles come, I wonder if you've ever been tempted to think, or you've heard teaching that says that if trouble comes, you must have got something wrong. Or you must have disobeyed God, or you must have found yourself in a sinful situation. Examine yourself and see why trouble and the storm has come. Now, sometimes that's exactly right. Storms come because of other people's sin or our own sin sometimes. So maybe not. But it is just not true to say that obeying God, following Jesus, will necessarily mean things go just fine. I think it's fascinating that this story simply says, then Jesus got into the boat and his disciples followed him. What were they doing? Being obedient, following him. And in a couple of hours maybe an hour, maybe half an hour, they suddenly find themselves in a storm. For some people, following Jesus leads to situations that are anything but fine. I get a regular email update from an organization called Open Doors. Open Doors supports Christians all around the world who are persecuted. 1 in 8, well, in fact, 1 in 7, they say now, of every Christian in the world is severely persecuted for their faith. In the November email update I got, there was this simple story. While children around the world write their Christmas lists, many others go without food, shelter, and community because they follow Jesus. Because they follow Jesus. Children are the most vulnerable to persecution for their family's faith. One girl is recorded as saying this: "We cannot build a church or speak openly about our beliefs," a 12-year-old girl in Mexico says. Her father was arrested for their faith, and the family risks exile for publicly celebrating Jesus. Following Jesus can lead you into storms. In fact, obeying his father led Jesus into the most severe of storms, his crucifixion. Following Jesus is the very best way to live, with a million blessings associated and no regrets at all. But ask the early church if following Jesus ever led them into storms. There's nothing like putting God first. But ask any Christian what it's like to follow Jesus, and they will tell you it has not always made life simpler. And here, following Jesus leads these men who are enjoying the presence of God in flesh and obeying the instructions of Immanuel straight into a storm. Matthew describes this storm, verse 24, as a furious storm. In the original language it was written, it was seismos megas. Seismos and megas, you can tell what's coming there. It's a great storm. It's a tempest. It's a shaking. It's the same word used for an earthquake. This is a really serious storm that they're ending up in. And it arose probably quite suddenly from the coming together of two pairs of things. The geographers among you will appreciate this. The lake was 600 feet below sea level. The mountains, the hills around, were 2,600 feet higher. That makes an enormous difference, because then you've also got warm air rising from the lake, and from the east, a wind coming very suddenly. And on that lake, it was well known that storms could suddenly be whipped up. A wind storm. Hence, verse 24, the waves swept over the boat. People say the waves could suddenly be 7 feet high. No wonder the boat was being swamped. And perhaps, not surprisingly, the disciples do exactly what you and I do. Don't tell me you don't. Exactly what you and I do when a storm hits. Panic ensues. It's very dated now. But Corporal Jones in Dad's Army, of course, is famous for his refrain, "Don't panic, don't panic." But all he's doing is expressing his panic and causing others to panic. He's trying to tell himself not to panic. He's encouraging others not to panic. But all he's doing in his trying not to panic is panicking and creating more panic. Now, the storm must have been furious, seismos, because even the experienced fishermen are crying out, "Lord, save us. We're going to drown." Sometimes it doesn't matter how much of life you've experienced, even of a similar thing, another storm can make you feel absolutely terrified yet again. And yet, there's a funny, I sense a funny internal conflict going on here. Because despite their lack of faith, what we'll see that Jesus says is little faith, they still turn to him and say, "Lord, save us." Do you notice that? It's like this funny thing. Do you ever find that in yourself? This internal conflict of, yes, I have some faith, but I don't know where it is at the minute, and I believe, but I don't believe. There's that famous story of the father who says, "I believe, help me in my unbelief," to Jesus. Do you recognize that sometimes in yourself? I do. It's a very real and relevant story. But what is Matthew wanting us to know in recording this remarkable event? Here's the answer to that question. The question the disciples asked in verse 27 is the question we must all face, storms or not. What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. And can I suggest to you that at Christmas, it is an especially relevant question? Because the Christmas picture of Jesus is about this big. And it's clearly, of course, a precious part of our story. But it's very easy at Christmas to domesticate Jesus and to tame him and simply have a sweet version. Now, the question, in fact, that the whole gospel writers, the whole Bible is asking us, and this story asks us is, who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. So earlier in Matthew 8, he heals the sick. He frees those oppressed by evil powers. He's Lord of all peoples. And this man, who is he? He commands creation. It's like the disciples are asking this. We know he's one of us, but it's God alone who does this sort of thing. You can see their little brains really struggling to keep up with the events going on here and trying to compute it. He's one of us. We've ate with him. We eat with him. We walk around with him. We sit with him. But what he's doing now, only God does. And so Psalm 89, verse 8, this is really important. Psalm 89, verse 8. In the Old Testament records this. The disciples were familiar with these words. Who is like you, Lord God Almighty? You, Lord, are mighty, and your faithfulness surrounds you. You rule over the surging sea. When its waves mount up, you still them. Another Psalm, 107, says this. He says of God, he stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. Matthew is presenting us with this. Who is this man? He's doing the things God does. Only God can still the waves and be in command of creation, and yet he's a human being, just like one of us. It's a little bit like when Jesus, remember the other story about Jesus on the water? He went out to them on the lake, walking on the lake. He went out walking on the lake. And the disciples are absolutely afraid and terrified. They're thinking they're seeing a ghost. What is Matthew in that instance trying to tell us, and the other gospel writers? Who is it the Old Testament says walks on the waters? Any idea? God alone does that. Again, the gospel writers are presenting us with this man. He's just like one of us. And yet he's doing what only God does. He's providing bread. Who does that? Well, God did that in the Old Testament. We're being confronted with this in a storm or not in a storm. This man is God with us. He is Immanuel. Which, of course, we love to remember at Christmas. And here we get a fascinating glimpse, I think, as well. Another glimpse into the fact that he is God and man. You see, one moment, Jesus is sleeping in the boat. Why is he sleeping? Stupid question. Why do you sleep? Well, he's sleeping because he's tired. He's had a full day. He's working real hard. The crowds are very intense around him. He's doing a lot of stuff. He's tired. One moment he's sleeping because fully man, he's tired from ministry demands. The next moment, fully God, he's commanding nature. As a man, he sleeps. As God, he can still sleep in a violent storm even when the others are quaking in fear. Now, of course, we pray, and I know you regularly pray, that our furious storms become, like this one, verse 26, completely calm. It's one of the things that I can honestly say I'm regularly praying about various people in Citygate, that the storm they are going through will be calmed. It's a good prayer to pray. Keep praying it. But the disciples' lack of faith, their little faith, their fear in the face of this storm was rooted in not yet knowing Jesus as he truly is. And that is the lesson they get here and the message that Matthew is wanting to give to us. What you need most when storms hit your life is not an explanation that makes it all now make sense, but a bigger, clearer, fuller view of Jesus in the middle of your storm. One writer says about the book of Job, you might know something about the book of Job. Job had all manner of disaster come on him. God allowed, in that instance, the devil to try him. And this writer says this: it is one of the many excellencies of the book of Job that he is brought to contentment, listen to this, brought to contentment without ever knowing all the facts of his case. Let's be honest, you've sometimes thought, haven't you, God, just explain it to me, will you? Haven't you? Haven't I? Yes. Just explain it, God, and then it'll all make sense. And okay, well, I don't like it, but fair enough. It is one of the many excellencies of the book of Job that he is brought to contentment without ever knowing all the facts of his case. He does not say, Job, in the end, now I see it all. He never sees it all. He sees God. And so Job chapter 42, verse 5, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. These disciples in this boat had heard of God. They knew of God. They followed God. They were now following Jesus and beginning to understand him. They'd heard about God. Now they'd seen him in the storm. And I'm sure the disciples were still perplexed. Perplexed that Jesus would allow them to go through this. I can imagine them, can't you, saying afterwards, I bet you've said this to God, asking him afterwards, if you knew the storm was coming, why take us there? Have you not said that? Now, this doesn't answer all of it. It's not meant to be simplistic. But it's also true that it's right there in the storm, even because of the storm, that they see more clearly than ever who Immanuel is, who God in the flesh is. That's his purpose for them and his purpose for us. This pine cone here is a real pine cone. I've kept it on my shelf in my study for a number of years. It replaced one that I lost. It was a littler one, and I'm annoyed I lost it because I found this pine cone in the most trying year of my life. I was really unwell. I was off work. I was struggling in 1,000 ways. I can't tell you, it was horrendous. And I was going for a walk one day with someone who was just helping support me, just walking alongside me. Nothing clever to say, just walking with me. I really appreciated it. And while we were walking in a park one day, I found this little pine cone. And I've seen pine cones before, and what's a pine cone? I mean, it's nothing really. But this little pine cone, as I set my eyes on it, it's like a little revelation to me. If God can make something so intricate and design something to replicate itself and put that into place in creation, and even know every detail of that pine cone, every molecule in it, how many bits it's got, and so on. If he can know all of that, and it's a pine cone, I'm probably all right. Because he knows all about me. And I'm worth a whole lot more than a pine cone. And so I kept that little pine cone for years on my shelf. Sadly, I lost it. And it was a reminder always, God knows, God cares. He can design and care for a pine cone. He's got me in his hand. One final thing. Mark's account has the disciples asking Jesus, accusing him actually, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" In fact, maybe they didn't say it like that. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" I wonder when you felt like that last. Storms do that. You felt it, haven't you? It's part of the response that panic elicits. Don't you care? Jesus is asleep. Have you felt like that sometimes as well? Jesus, theologically, I know you never have to sleep, but you seem to be asleep on my case in the middle of this storm. Tim Keller writes this: if we ask again the question, why does God allow evil and suffering to continue? Why does God allow storms in my life to continue? And we look at the cross of Jesus, we still don't know what the answer is. However, we now know what the answer isn't. It can't be that he doesn't love us. It can't be that he's indifferent or detached from our situation. Do you understand the logic? I don't know why this is going on. Someone give me an answer. God's probably not going to give you an answer, but he has given you this. He's given you absolute proof that he does care. The disciples of Jesus, like we do sometimes, Lord, don't you care? And he wants to point us back 2,000 years to a little hill where Jesus is nailed, hands and feet, to wooden beams. And if God is saying anything in that, he is saying, I love you. Despite all your wickedness, I love you. When you're in a storm and there are all sorts of things you don't know, I hope you're picking this up. I've said it quite a lot of times in the last couple of years. When you're in a storm and you don't know what's going on, what do? You go back to what you do know. You go back to what these disciples have just got, which is a bigger, fuller, greater view of Jesus as he truly is. He's the Lord of creation. And that's where you go back to. You go back to Jesus. You've got loads of questions. I'm not saying they aren't good questions. I'd love to know some answers as well. But when there's stuff you don't know, you go back. You're not ditching your brain. You're going back with your little brain that we've all got to the things that God has convinced us of, that he knows, that he cares, that he loves, that his son came and died that you might be with him forever, not just have a nice little life here and now, but for eternity, enjoy him and rejoice with him. We go back to the things we do know and we stand on those and we say, yes, I see Jesus. Whatever it is that I don't see in the middle of this. The storm in our hearts and minds is stilled when we see more of who Jesus is. And we move from fear, what is this, to faith. Who is this? Jesus. Immanuel, God with us in our storms. If you're a Christian here this morning, I want to help you see Jesus again, as we've tried to help you do all morning. If you're not a Christian here this morning, I want to help you to see this, Jesus. Not the little Jesus that you might have had an idea of, not the distant person in the sky who doesn't really have anything to do with you, but a Jesus who hangs on a cross and says, I love you enough to die and redeem you. And I want to encourage us in a moment to dare to respond to him. And there's a little song that one of the band wrote this week. Every week I say to them, because they say, what response song do you want? And I say, I'm sure you can write one. And of course, no one ever does. But this week, someone did. A little refrain, a little couple of verses. And they're going to sing it. And we're going to soak in it and enjoy it. And if you're a Christian, at the right point for you, I want you to stand and use the song to help you speak to and relate to Jesus in your storm and say, Jesus, I may not have any answers, but I see you. Help me to stay full of you as long as you allow this to endure. And keep praying that the storm will be stilled, of course. But until it is, we need to see Jesus. And if you're not a Christian, I want to dare you to do this. I want to dare you, with whatever little you think you know or you don't know, at the right moment for you to stand where you are. And just to say to Jesus, I don't know everything yet, but I know I need you. Please come and show me more of who you are. So I want to encourage you that there's more of Jesus to know in the storm. Keep looking to him. Keep knowing that he is Immanuel, fully God, fully man, still with us by his Spirit. So let's sing this song. When you're ready, you might want to start standing up now. Yes, that's absolutely fine, because many of you are in a storm and wrestling and struggling. And if you're not a Christian, find your moment to stand to and respond to Jesus. Let's sing.